The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is the second Spider-Man movie in the rebooted Spider-Man films, and the latest Spider-Man movie we have gotten thus far. Now, going into 2014, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was easily one of my most anticipated movies of the whole year. I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. I personally loved The Amazing Spider-Man. I loved Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, and I was so excited to see the direction this franchise was going to continue to take. As I mentioned in my spoiler talk for The Amazing Spider-Man, I love that movie, and I personally don't really know why a lot of people hate it. I've heard their opinions, I've heard their claims, but I just really can't understand them. There, however, are also a number of people who hate The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and I can understand why some people hate this movie. And while I don't feel The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is the worst Spider-Man movie we've ever gotten, I do find this movie enjoyable. I've watched it, I enjoy it, but it is definitely a flawed movie. First of all, starting with what I like, towards the beginning of this movie, you see Spider-Man, he's swinging through New York City, it's the day of graduation, he's gonna be late for it, but first he's gonna stop, the Rhino, before he's the Rhino, from stealing this chemical from Oscorp. And right out the gate, I'm just reminded to why I love Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, because the whole time he's doing battle with these criminals, he's toying with them, he's making jokes at them, he's shit-talking them, he's just bringing a lot of comedy, and that's who Spider-Man is. So eventually he stops them, he swings into graduation, and I just so love the way Peter gets his diploma. Grabs Gwen and kisses her in front of everybody, then he just high-fives with the principal and just walks off the stage like a boss. In high school nowadays, though, they probably would have stripped him of his diploma just for doing that. But then it's shortly afterwards we get to some of the issues that I have with this movie and a lot of people have with this movie. Here you see that Gwen and Peter have agreed to remain a couple, they've agreed to stay together to make it work. But the whole time, Peter's having these flashbacks of what her father told him, leave her alone, keep her out of it, keep her safe. So at one point, he breaks up with her, and then later on in the movie, they try to, be friends, but of course they can't be friends because they're still in love with each other, so, they become a couple again, then they break up again, and this happens a few times throughout the movie. And I didn't like that the movie did that. I mean, I hate when couples frequently break up and get back together in real life. I'm not a fan of it in movies either. And one of the reasons I had such a problem with it in this movie is because Gwen and Peter, they just had killer chemistry together. They were really cute together, just the conversations they have. You really just sit there, it's like, just date for the whole movie. Like, I mean, come on. You guys are meant to. That right there is a storyline you could have easily fixed for this movie. Now we get into Max Dillon. He's played by Jamie Foxx. He's an engineer who's working for Oscorp. And this guy right here, he's a little bit of a nut. This dude is completely obsessed with Spider-Man. He's got his picture plastered all over his room. I mean, he's completely obsessed with him, especially after he runs into Spider-Man, after, Spider-Man was fighting those criminals, and Spider-Man looked at him and he said, hey, man, you're somebody. You're my eyes and ears out here. And then one night, while he's doing some work in the electrical grid, he gets shocked by the electricity, falls into a pool of genetically mutated electric eels. They attack him, and now he's got super insane electric powers and becomes Electro. And I will say this, I did like Jamie Foxx as both Max Dillon and as Electro. I thought he played a cool, menacing villain. I really loved how Electro looked visually. Even just seeing the powers he had, the way it looked visually on screen was amazing. So anyways, he now has his powers. He's in New York City. Everyone around him's terrified of him. He's honestly pretty terrified too because he doesn't know what the fuck's going on. But he's seeing himself all over Times Square and it's making him think, oh my gosh, I'm finally somebody. And then Spider-Man shows up to try to confront him, and then all the cameras shoot to Spider-Man, and they're having it being portrayed that, Spider-Man's taking on Electro because Electro's the bad guy. That really kind of hits a nerve with Electro, and now Electro just snaps and he's like, alright, I guess I will be a villain now, and I'm gonna kill Spider-Man. And I gotta say right there, although I did love the way, Jamie Foxx portrayed Electro in this movie, I didn't like how they just immediately made him a villain with that. I mean, part of me gets it. I mean, he's kind of an unstable character, he's really weird in how he thinks and how he feels, but I feel they could have transitioned him into a villain a little bit better. And now in one of the other big storylines, we are introduced to Harry Osborn in this movie, played by Dane DeHaan. Now, as you all know, in the comics, Harry is Peter's best friend. These two are almost inseparable. One of the things that I really give a lot of credit to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies is you really did buy that Tobey Maguire and James Franco, playing Peter and Harry, were best friends. Those two killed it together. They had great chemistry. You really bought that they were best friends. Here, when Harry and Peter reunite because Harry's been off at boarding school for a really long time, they do meet, they hug, they joke around a little with each other and they catch up on old times, but for the whole time, I bought that they were friends. I never quite bought that they were best friends. And granted, you could argue that that case is because, you know, Harry's been gone for so long, but when they talk about their past and their childhood, how, you know, Harry was there for Peter when his parents were gone and all that good stuff, how they really seemed to be really close when they were kids. I wish I bought it a little bit more here. And once Harry gets back, we see that Norman Osborn is officially dying from the disease that he has, and he tells Harry, hey, guess what? I've been a shitty dad to you. Not gonna apologize for it. All I'm gonna leave you with is this disease that I'm dying from, guess what? It's genetic. You're gonna get it too. Leaves him with some data on how to figure out maybe how you can beat it, and then he's gone. It's like, well, Norman Osborn was never a villain in this movie, but you at least got to see he was a dick. So now that's another storyline that they have to deal with in this movie. You know, Harry realizes that he's going to die. He does a little more research into the genetically enhanced spiders. He discovers that Richard Parker was trying to figure out a way to use their venom to cure human diseases. And he's thinking to himself, hey, Spider-Man got bit by one of those spiders. That gives him the power he has, which means he can self-heal. Maybe if I can get his blood, that will cure me. And because, you know, Peter is, you know, the photographer for Spider-Man, he's asking him like, hey, can you get him to give me a little bit of his blood? Can you really help me out here? Because I really need you. And of course, Peter wants to help Harry because Harry's his best friend, but he knows, because, you know, Peter's just as smart as he is, that mixing that blood with Harry's blood may not be what it could be. It could actually make things worse for Harry. Of course, Harry doesn't understand that because, you know, Harry's dying. He doesn't really have time to think that stuff through. He's desperate to find a solution. Of course, when Peter comes back as Spider-Man to tell him, you know, Harry is just furious and now he hates Spider-Man, thinks he's a fraud, and now he basically wants Spider-Man dead. Now, this was an area of the movie that I actually did like. I like seeing that Peter is so conflicted because, you know, he wants to help Harry, but at the same time, he doesn't want to do something without thinking it through because, you know, Peter, being as smart as he is, knows that these kind of situations, especially if they hinge on life or death, you gotta think it through. But at the same time, you do understand Harry's perspective. You know, he doesn't have time to think it through. He's going to die at some point. If he doesn't figure out how to beat this disease soon, it's eventually just gonna take over him and kill him. Harry decides he's gotta take matters into his own hands. He goes to find Electro, who's been experimented on in Oscorp Tower since he was captured from the fight in Times Square with Spider-Man. He's able to get him to free himself, able to get him to help him. You know, they start fucking with everyone in Oscorp after they tried to basically fuck Harry over. They get some more information. They find the genetically enhanced spiders. They're able to get the venom from that. Harry immediately injects it on himself, and of course, it doesn't work. It starts actually deteriorating him. It's making him green, giving him a goblin appearance. Soon discovers that Norman also developed this armored suit with weaponry and a glider, quickly puts all that on, and that's helping slow down the disease a little bit more, helping Harry, you know, contain it. But now Electro is on the loose, and now after, you know, Peter and Gwen made up for the umpteenth time, Peter has to go out and stop him again. I gotta say, I love this final battle between Electro and Spider-Man. I like throwing down in this electric grid, which really makes it hard for him to battle Electro because he's just basically flowing through the electricity in the air. Seeing Spider-Man swinging around this grid trying to fight Electro, but he can't, but he's making it hard for Electro to fight him back. You see, they seem pretty evenly matched, and I love seeing that in a fight. This fight had really awesome music too, I gotta say that right now. Eventually, Gwen's able to overload the grid, which becomes too much for Electro, which kills him. But then Harry shows up as the Green Goblin, which I know some fans were a little surprised by, even a little upset with, because Norman wasn't the Green Goblin first, but I have been told that in some versions of the comics, it just went directly to Harry being the Green Goblin. But the second he shows up, you're just like, oh shit. Oh boy, this won't end well. He tells Spider-Man after he sees Spider-Man with Gwen, he's like, oh shit, you're Peter. He's like, alright, well guess what? You wouldn't help me? Now I'm gonna really fuck with you. And he takes Gwen, brings her to the top of this clock tower. He eventually drops her through the tower, but eventually Spider-Man catches her, saves her from dying from that, puts her on one of the gear engines. He's like, stay here, I gotta go kick ass. But unfortunately, these gears are moving really quickly. She's not gonna be able to stay on there for long. Spider-Man's able to knock out the Green Goblin, but not before Gwen's now falling. And right here, I was just like, oh god, no, oh, no. No. Like I said, I actually read the Spider-Man comics. I knew it was coming. And you see it all in slow motion. Spider-Man shoots out a web to get to Gwen. He's able to connect with her. But unfortunately, he was just a small second too late. The whiplash from the web snaps her neck back. She bangs her head on the floor. she dies. And the scene is just so heartbreaking and so sad. You feel so terrible for Peter. He eventually comes down to her. He's holding her in his arms. He's just all like, Gwen? Gwen? You know, he's crying, he's devastated, he's heartbroken, and you can't help but feel how responsible he feels, because he's probably thinking in his head, if I had just listened to her father, she would be alive. But then we get to the ending of the movie, and I think this is when a lot of people were just like, okay, I'm done. Fuck this movie. You know, we have Gwen's funeral. You know, you see Peter visiting her grave. They montage it throughout the year because you see him there during different seasons. Then we see Harry in prison, and we discover that he's forming a team together. You imagine it's the Sinister Six. One of the guys they recruited was indeed the Rhino from the beginning of this movie, you know, giving him now this Rhino armored suit to go and just wreck shit. At this point, you know, the Rhino's out just fucking with New York City. Spider-Man's nowhere to be found because Peter has basically been retired from being Spider-Man for the past year. But it's after he listens to Gwen's graduation speech, I guess he gets that oomph back that he needs to be Spider-Man. Then he goes back to New York City, he saves a kid, and then he decides he's gonna fight the Rhino, and, you know, now he's Spider-Man again. And that is where the movie ends. And yeah, if I'm being honest, I'm not a fan of this ending either. In my personal opinion, they should have ended it with Gwen dying and Peter just being retired from Spider-Man. And then if they made a third movie, which they intended to, and they probably would have if this movie was a little better received, then at the beginning of the third movie, you know, the Sinister Six show up. You could have the Rhino wreaking havoc then, and then along that movie, he comes out of retirement, and then he becomes Spider-Man again. I think that would have worked a lot better. But no, instead, they just completely shoehorned the Rhino into this movie just for the sake of having him in here. And the movie just quickly montaged from, you know, Peter being devastated at Gwen's death, visiting her grave for a year, montaging through that, being retired from Spider-Man, then hearing her speech and being like, alright, I'm over it, I'm better. Let's go save the world again. I don't know, I personally found that poorly executed. But all in all, I will say, for me anyway, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a pretty good movie. As I mentioned, I love Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. I still love the chemistry that, you know, Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker have together. I love seeing them together as a couple. I personally felt they should have just stayed a couple throughout this whole movie. I hated seeing them frequently break up and then make up. Jamie Foxx was a good villain. Wasn't as much of a fan of how they made him a villain, but once he became a villain, even when he was just Max Dillon, I really loved how he was in this movie. Dane DeHaan was a good Harry Osborn. I don't think I can say he was better than James Franco, mostly because, again, he and Andrew Garfield didn't have the same chemistry that James Franco and Tobey Maguire had. I wish I bought them as best friends a little bit more, but I did love Harry's storyline in this movie. It also did kind of feel like the Green Goblin was just shoehorned into this movie because, you know, they need the Green Goblin to kill Gwen because that's what happens in the comics, and they know they eventually want to bring Mary Jane into this franchise. I do love the action, I do love the visuals, I really love the music in this movie. I mean, holy shit, good job, Hans Zimmer. Really wasn't a fan of the ending. I mean, you think the Green Goblin was shoehorned in, the Rhino was completely, really shoehorned in. And in the past, I compared this movie to Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Has some moments that are awesome, amazing, kick-ass. You watch it, it's like, yes, I love this. Good job, movie. And then it has moments where it's like, I don't like that, that's stupid, that's terrible, why'd you even put that in the movie? What's the point of that? I don't like that. But similarly to Revenge of the Sith, I think this movie is enjoyable. I'll watch this occasionally, and in the end, I'll have fun with it. I don't hate it like people do. Personally, I think The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a pretty fixable movie, and I'm going to tell you how you do that. Keep the beginning action scene between him and the Rhino, but don't have the Rhino turn into the Rhino. Just have him a normal criminal. You can have him show up again in the third movie. In the beginning, have him conflicted on how he should be with Gwen. You know, should he date her, should he not? And then have something like Gwen Stacy do what Mary Jane did at the end of Spider-Man 2, you know? She could tell him, it's like, look, I love you, I get that there's risks, but I want to face them with you, I need you in my life. Then you can have them be a couple throughout this movie, really see their romance just continue to grow and develop. That way, when she dies at the end, it's even more sad and really hits you even more. Take Electro out of this movie entirely. As great as I thought Jamie Foxx was in this movie, when you really think about it, there really only needs to be one villain in this movie, and for the sake of the story, I thought he should have been gone. Keep Harry in this movie, keep his storyline, really focus a little bit more on the friendship with him and Peter Parker. Like, maybe give a flashback of them when they were kids and when they were really close friends, so you buy a little bit more just how close they are as friends. Have Harry around the halfway point become the Green Goblin. Have him wreak a little more havoc in the city to try to find a cure for his illness. Then throw in a bigger, longer, more intense battle with the Green Goblin and Spider-Man at the end. Have Green Goblin kill Gwen Stacy, and have the end of the movie with, you know, Peter Parker feeling guilt over Gwen's death. End the movie there. You do those little things and you have, in my opinion, a great Spider-Man movie. But in the end, this is what we got. Although it's not great, I do enjoy it, but if you hate it, I understand. And there it is. My build-up for Spider-Man Homecoming is completed. Spider-Man Homecoming comes out next week. I am so excited for it. I really hope this is the best Spider-Man movie yet. I'll get a spoiler talk up for that after I see it, so keep her tuned. But for now, that's all I gotta say. So guys, thank you so much for watching my video. Don't forget to leave a comment, like, subscribe, and I will see you all next time.